Welcome to lesson 7. We're going to continue with the distribution rollout and we're going to discuss the path. So if you're going to open up lesson 7, we got 3 very simple splines. Straight one, it's a curved, and then a bit of a windy one. So let's select the Forest Pack Pro. Let's select the spline right over there. Modify tab, let's add in just one object for now. So custom object, teapot. Say yes. Now it automatically is on image mode, which is fine. We've discussed what image mode can do for us. For this purpose, I just want to go under display and change this to mesh so you can see the actual objects. Scrolling back up, let's change mode to path. Now everything disappears, which is fine, and we've got a new menu now. So what we can do is underneath path, we can choose to add one, delete, or add multiple. For now, let's add one path, and then of course we need to select that path. And immediately you can see that we have an arrangement of teapots perfectly spread out. Now the first option is GeoID, which we'll get to in a moment. First, let's talk about spacing. So right now we can actually choose the exact spacing between each scattered object. Next is in vertex positions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this button here, and I'm going to select the other 2 splines, clicking the add button, which pretty easy, just to add in an extra set of splines here. Now if I choose in vertex positions, it is going to place a scattered object wherever the actual vertex is of the spline. So let's have a look at the first example. Now right over here on the straight spline, there's only a vertex there and a vertex there. On this curve, there are multiple vertices all the way around, and then as you can see over here, in the straight areas, there is no scattered object and only where the curved area is. Now this also goes hand in hand. If we go underneath interpolation, underneath the spline, adaptive. If I change the adaptive, then obviously it increases the vertices. Let's untick that. Let's go back into the Forest Pack Pro. So let's go back to spacing. And the next one we have is spline offset. Now, if I increase this, you can see that I'm offsetting. Let's go to the top view. I'm offsetting each scattered object from its original spline. Let's reset back to 0. Random position. Now, with spacing, if I put this at, let's say, 5,000 units, I know that between each pivot point is 5,000 units. I can randomize that. For example, if I put this at 1,000 and press enter, then each one will have a randomization of an extra additional 1,000. So if I increase this, you can see that they're all randomly moving and adjusting, giving a bit more randomization to it. So untick that, go back to original. The next option over here is the follow path. If I untick X, you'll see that when it is a curved spline, so let's activate it again, you can see that all the teapots are actually following the spline, which is great. If I don't want that, I can untick the X, and then they are simply just following where the position was and when they were created. The Z or Z will be the exact same, obviously, when you're going upwards. The last one I have is the GeoID. If I change this to sequence, nothing happens, and that is because we need multiple objects. So let's click it on random for now. I'm going to add another custom object, which is the pyramid. And now that we add the pyramid, you can see that the sequence is random. We got a pyramid, teapot, teapot, pyramid, teapot, 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 pyramid, and it goes on and on and on. If I add in another object, and then one more object, so I've got all of these objects here, you'll see that the pattern is random. There is no order to the actual pattern. If you wanted to follow a specific order, then you can change this to the sequence tab, and what's going to happen is it is going to go according to your geometry layout, which means teapot, pyramid, sphere, box, teapot, pyramid, sphere, box, and on and on and on, and that will now be the sequence throughout the actual scatter. So that's what the GeoID does. Very simple, very straightforward. The next mode that we have is called reference. So let's actually delete the Forest Pack and discuss the reference. Now the idea behind using a reference is, especially when you have AutoCAD plans, and what happens is you are presented with that. So I'm pretty sure you're familiar with what you see over here. Now when you are creating vegetation for your clients, you can actually allocate objects based on reference points. So we'll dive into this section in a little bit. For now, let's actually start understanding how it actually works. So the first thing that I have is the 4 objects that we usually use. I've got a simple circle, a couple of rectangles, different shapes over here, and I've got 2 surfaces that are edit polys. So let's start off by creating a forest pack. I'm going to select the circle, activate it. Let's go into modify panel, and then as we usually do, add a custom object. For now, let's just add the actual teapot. So the default mode is always going to be image. What you need to do here is just scroll down until you get to reference, and the first thing you'll notice, it turns red, meaning you don't have a reference attached to the actual object. So what you need to do is make sure you're underneath the distribution reference. So the first option is obviously to add a reference. The second is to add multiple. So if I select that, you can see again stock standard, we've got this menu where we can add as many as we want, and then of course the delete button. So for now, let me click the plus button and just select the circle, and immediately one scattered object appears. For this demonstration, let's go underneath display and just choose mesh so we can actually see the actual scattered object. So the first option that we have here is pivot. Now what that is telling us is that we can scatter on the actual pivot of the surface that we've chosen. Now remember, with pivot you can only scatter one object at a time, and that is why it's really useful when you are dealing with this from the AutoCAD plans, because each of these will obviously represent a bush, a shrub, a plant, or a tree. Let's have a look here. Now these 5 objects over here each have a different pivot point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the plus button activated and attach that one's in the middle, bottom left, bottom right, top left, and top right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select each item, and you can see, let's go into the top view quickly. You can see that the pivot point of each item is exactly where the scattered object is. Back to perspective mode, let's select the forest pack again. So that is the pivot mode. Now if we go into mesh faces, this one is really recommended for a solid object, so not a spline. You want to choose something that obviously is a solid object. Let's delete by pressing the X button. Let's go into the plus and choose the 2 meshes that we have. I am going to select this one over here as well, just to show you what happens if you do select a spline. Top view again. Now the F4 mode in edged faces, you can see the differences between these 2 objects. On the left, I have done my own edits to create triangles, and on the right hand side I've left it as quads, and then of course this one over here we'll just leave it as a spline. So what's going to happen is I'm going to activate mesh faces, and as I do that you can see that it's actually scattered quite a few items. Let's jump to the spline. Now we've got 4 items here scattered, and the reason that there's 4 is that 3D Max and Forest Pack, they are doing their best to determine how this would appear as a mesh object subdivided into triangles. So it's very unpredictable. This is why we don't use splines with the reference mode. If I show you the one over here that is quads, so you'll notice that there are 2 scattered objects per quad that we have over here, and that is because again Forest Pack is trying its best to divide everything into tries. So you can imagine that there's going to be a triangle over there, and probably a triangle right over here, and probably over there, because each face should only have 1 item. Even though we've got 2 in the quads, again it's unpredictable because we don't know where the triangles are. If we look at the one that is divided into triangles, we can see perfectly that each face, each triangle, has only 1 scatter. Over here, images by face, if I put it at 2, again you'll now have 2 items per face. If we look at the quad version, we actually have 4 per quad, but then again remember, Forest Pack is trying to divide this into triangles. So always work with tries, because it's obviously going to give you a much more accurate scatter. Underneath here we got randomized position, which is really great if you wanted randomized. If I untick this, you'll see that all the scattered items basically go into the middle of the face. So you can see again over here, if this was divided right over there, that would be 1 try, that would be the second try. They are scattered basically in the middle. And again, you can increase as many scatters as you want. Let's stick it to 2 for now. Material ID. Now, when you are scattering on a surface, you can choose material IDs for each polygon or for each face. So if I select this plane right over here, I've already allocated IDs. Let me show you how I did that. So by selecting the plane over here, if I go into polygon mode, right over there, you'll see that this is ID 4, ID 2, 2, 3, and I've just basically chosen between 1 and 4, and I've randomly chosen different polygon IDs. Now if we go into the scatter again, we can actually decide which of the faces can get a scattered item. At the moment it is material ID 0, which means all of them get. It's the same as putting a 0 and pressing enter. All IDs will get. If I only wanted on ID number 1, I can input number 1, press enter. Then I know that on this scattering surface, only the ID number 1 will actually get scattered objects. If I wanted on multiple, all I need to do is put a space. Then I can choose, let's say for example, number 4. So this is telling me ID number 1 and number 4 should get scattered. Press enter, and then you can tell that that's ID number 4. And of course you can do multiple, so 1, 3, and 4, press enter, and then again, same concept. The align function is really useful as well, so let's just take this back to 0 and everything. You can see the direction that the teapots are facing. They are going in a very random direction. If I untick align, they will then go in the direction that the original object, which is this guy over here, was created in. The scale function is a really awesome function as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to delete those objects. I would like to go back to pivot, and I'm just going to activate the circle that I have over here. Perspective mode. Now, if I select this, because you must remember it is a reference that we are using, which means that if I select the actual circle or any reference object and I move the reference, it actually moves the scatter. Again, this is why it's really useful to use it in architectural plans, because you can move each plant and bush individually. Now, if I scale the radius, you'll see that nothing's actually busy happening here. If I scale it using the scaling tool, it is affecting the actual size of the actual scattered object. So let's go back into the forest pack mode and untick scale. Now if I untick scale, that means that the scale is determined by the original object, which is this guy over here. So if I select the reference object, if I change it, nothing happens. If I scale it, nothing happens again. The only way to change it is the original size, and remember, the original size is what is going to count. So if you want the reference to have full control, make sure scale is ticked, and then by selecting the reference you can not only move it, but of course as well scale it up and down. Okay, let's go back into the forest pack mode. Next over here we have match geometry by name. So let's delete that and let's go to the top view quickly, and I'd like to show you what I've set up here. Now when you are presented with AutoCAD plans just like this over here, what you can do is you can allocate all of the scattered objects according to their own reference points. So what I've done, and I've gone ahead and created a system for myself, I've selected all of these small guys right over here and I've called them bush-small. These ones over here will be bush large. I do have a couple of bush mediums, and then this big guy over here is just labeled as tree. And again, just for this purpose, what I've done is I've taken one of each icon. I've made a copy right over there. I have put the name next to it so you can see which one belongs where, and then of course an object as a reference for each of these. So let's have a look how this actually works. Forest pack, as usual. Let's actually create an icon mode. Click and drag. Modify panel. Let's go straight into the reference. So the first thing we want to do is let's actually select our geometry. So I'm going to select the first item, which is bush small. Select that item right over there, and I'm also going to select the box, the pyramid, and the cylinder. So I've got the 4 objects over here. We're still in reference mode. What is really important now is to label each one. I know that the sphere is actually bush-small. Now naming is really important here. You have to name things in order for this feature to actually work. Bush medium, this will actually be bush large, and the last one simply just put as tree. Okay, Now, what we've done is we have labeled the items in the geometry list according to the names of the reference images. Really, really important that they match one another. Of course, otherwise this isn't going to work. So what we do here is we're going to say match geometry by name. And as I do that, nothing's happened because we need to attach all of the reference images. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the multiple selection tool, and I'm going to select all the bushes right over there, and of course the tree, select the tree and press select. And as I do that, it has automatically allocated all of the spheres to bush small. So you can see right over there, these are the bush smalls, and as you can see, all of them have the spheres. The bush mediums get the square, the tree got the tree, and the bush large got the actual pyramid. So let's go into perspective mode and have a look. Now, this is fantastic because it was really very, very quick and easy to actually do this, and it automatically populated all the reference images for us. So let's take a step back and see how that actually worked. So if I go back into the forest pack item, again, remember what's important. The name of the geometry must match the name of the scattered object. So for example, if I had to come in over here, and we know that this is the tree. So this is the object that is representing the tree, and any reference image that matches tree will obviously get this object. If I come inside here, which is the tree, if I just change this to, let's say, object as an example, and I press enter, what's actually happening now is that it is automatically going to get the very first item. So that's important to know. Same concept, if I type in TRE, it is gonna pick up tree because it's trying to pick up as close as it can to each object. So a T will work, R, E, and then E, all of those work. If I press a 1 over here, it's not gonna work. So the naming convention is important, the same as the following. If I go to bush-small, if I remove everything except S, that is still gonna work because bush is correct, dash is correct, and the S. So it's picking up every single letter. If, for example, I come over here and just type in bush, it's going to get slightly confused on which one to do because a lot of the items have bush. So, very important, naming convention, really important, follow through with it. The last little tip that I'd like to do for you is the following. So we just discussed that if something is mislabeled, so for example, just for now, let me just put this at 1 and press enter. We just discussed that if it cannot find the reference image that matches the geometry's name, it will use the very first scattered item, and in this case, it is a sphere. If you do not want that, if you'd rather leave it blank, very, very simple, you can actually add a new item, disable it. I'm actually going to call this an assigned for now, and I'm going to move it all the way to the top. And because the very first item is a disabled item, that means that if any of these are not located matching to the reference, it will actually be a blank item over there. And then lastly, we have use regular expressions, which is an advanced feature. You're using an algorithm to select specific items that you want. I'm going to leave a link for you to read up about it, and then you can experiment with the different examples. What I'm going to give you is just a few that I use from time to time. What I do recommend is you delete 1, delete 2. The very first one, I am going to disable it, and I'm going to call this unassigned again. Press enter. Underneath here, what we can now start doing is using a regular expression. So I'm going to switch on use regular expression, and right over there I'm going to introduce to you the first one, which is the wildcard, and that is just a full stop. Now it matches any type of character each time it is used. So for example, if I press 1, 2, 3, 4 dots and press enter, what's happened is that I've told the regular expression algorithm to find any item that is 4 letters and only 4 letters. So for example, we know that tree is 4. If I go into 5, nothing. And if I go into 6, nothing. 7, nothing. So the full stop, being the wildcard, is allowing you to select how many characters each reference needs to have in order to receive a scatter. Another one that I can show you is a full stop and asterisk. That's a quick way of saying I want every single reference to actually get a scattered item. Another example over here is if I open up the curly parentheses, and inside I'm going to put a number 4. As I press enter, it is basically saying anything with 4 letters should receive a scatter. This is useful because I can say something like from 4 to 10, so anything between 4 and 10 letters, I can press enter, and then it will only select those ones in between 4 and 10 letters. So it's a very advanced feature to use. It can definitely come in handy. For now, these are the only examples that I will show you. Again, the link for you to read up on more of them. And that is it for the reference. The last one, if we can just delete this forest pack, the last one that we are going to deal with is the particle flow. So what I'm going to do is zoom out. Let's go to an empty space over here. Now, this lesson is not dedicated to how particle flow works. What I am going to show you is how to link them together. So the first thing is what we need to do is go underneath particle systems, PF source, which is particle flow source. I'm going to click and drag. Let's put this at an easy size. Now, if you're unfamiliar with it, all that it's doing, it's basically emitting particles right out of the emitter over here. Now what we want to do is we want it to emit the particles, but we want Forest Pack to be the source and allow us to manipulate and change the actual objects that it is emitting and scattering. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a Forest Pack icon. Let's go into icon mode, click and drag, modify tab, and what we're going to do here is I am first of all going to create a sphere because we need an object to actually scatter or emit. So just grab a little sphere for now. Let's go back into Forest Pack. The first thing that we need to do is add a custom object. So let's add new item, custom. Let's click the sphere. The next thing we need to do is change the mode. So we are going to change it to particle flow. Activating particle flow gives us a brand new menu. So we can now add a particle flow here, and then there are a couple of events that we can do. So number one is underneath particle flow, let's click the plus button and attach and link the actual particle flow to the Forest Pack. And immediately you can see it has adopted the geometry that we chose. So scrolling back and forward, you can see how it's emitting all of those particles. Now the great thing about using the Forest Pack is that we can manipulate and transform basically all of these objects for us. The options that we have here, all particle flow events, this is ticked. If this is ticked, we cannot press any of these buttons because what it's saying is all particle flow events will be used when we are using the Forest Pack. What that means is if we go into particle view over here, we'll see that we have this event. This one event is basically controlling what is happening over here. If you have multiple events, then what you can do is you can go into the Forest Pack and you can allow all of the events to be a part of the Forest Packing scattering. So let me show you with an example. What we need to do is let's just grab our Forest Pack, and once we have that selected, you'll see that it's ticked. That means all of the events. What that means is if we take this event and basically create a duplicate of it, we can attach this straight away here. And once they are connected, we have two birthing patterns. Now what that means is we can obviously change the actual directions. So let me quickly change this one here. So now you'll see I've got the up and the down. Right now, if we scroll backwards and forwards, you can see we have technically two events that are happening. We have this event and this event. So two events are busy happening at the moment. If I untick this, everything disappears. If I press the plus button, we can choose which event out of these two we actually want to be part of the Forest Pack. Let's choose event 005. And then you'll see that only that one is a part of the actual Forest Pack. I can press the plus button again, choose event 004, and obviously both will be attached. This gives you the freedom to choose all of the events or only certain events depending on your PF source. And then of course the align and the scale. By enabling the align function, you can match the orientation of the particles, and if you enable the scale, this will actually match all the scale of the particles. So remember, your biggest asset by connecting a Forest Pack item to the P-flow is enabling all of these menus over here to give you a lot more control on how you want to scatter everything. That is it for this lesson. I'll catch you in the next one.